All right, folks. Hello and welcome back once again to the only coast to coast radio show that's all about the information economy. It's called Inside Analysis. Your host here, Eric Kavanagh. And I'm so excited to be in Austin, Texas, my favorite city, at the current 24 conference with Confluent. And I'm with now Thomas Lowe. He is the founder of a company called Good Labs, or co-founder of Good Labs Studio. You build cool software and you like to do new cool things, and streaming data is pretty cool. It's not completely new. We've had message brokers for years, but Kafka really changed all that and I think commercialized the reality of streaming data. And now we're 10 years into that and really cool things are happening. What do you see, Thomas, that you find so compelling about streaming data? And maybe what are some of the interesting use cases that you've got?
Yeah, on our side, we are pretty much focused on AI engineering on our side. Our company, one third of our company is postdoc PhD on focusing on both AI and other advanced technology type of research. And then the rest of the company is actually software engineers like myself. And what we are quite focusing on the technology side is what we call the streaming AI. And in terms of the business use case, there are two verticals that we are pretty much focused on, both from the revenue perspective, is also in the impact perspective of it. The first one is medical AI. We basically help two of the largest technology firm in the world to train their medical AI. And then the second one, which is actually we are quite focusing on, is the financial crime.
Mm.
And on the financial crime side, not only the fact that we help some of the clients to build a large-scale bespoke fraud hunting platform, handling roughly around 8 terabytes of near real-time data on a daily basis, for them to be able to not only perform real-time analytics, for example, account takeover, which most of the fraudster will be able to go in and out to redirect the money transfer to other area within 5 minutes.
Wow.
So without a streaming platform, it's very, very difficult to be able to detect and stuff. And at the same time, we are pushing out two products this year. One of them is what we call the phishing penetration test, because one of the area that it's quite concerning to us, roughly around last year, May timeframe, when we were testing out a voice biometric system for a financial institution client. What we found is we were utilizing one of the state-of-the-art AI voice cloning technology to clone our director of financial crimes voice. And alongside with the authentic human voice, we sent it to one of the very leading voice biometric system company in the world. Unfortunately, the result came back like half of the time they weren't able to deterministically conclude that there's any fraudulent activity in place from the AI cloning. And then at the same time, last year, one of the US Senator, Sherrod Brown, who is the chairperson of the banking committee for the US, actually sent out 6 open letters to 6 financial institution, tier 1, who offer voice authentication service. You probably heard about this. It's what they call the your voice is your password functionality.
Right.
So when you called in, you don't need to tell them the password anymore. They would just analyze it or say, oh, that's Eric. Okay, you can access your bank account.
Right. Bad news.
Yeah, bad news. And Sherrod Brown basically want to understand one of the primary question to the banks is how often and how frequent do you guys assess and evaluate your current voice biometric system, the effectiveness of it against the uprising AI clone voice? And we know already, even last year, some of the very leading edge AI voice cloning startup. It's receiving massive amount of VC funding. And even firsthand, our research team has been informing us the progression of the AI technology on the voice cloning. It's just advancing so fast. The duration of the voice sample becoming shorter and shorter. And there's a rumor that Microsoft technology only needs 3 seconds of your voice to be able to clone quite effectively, whether it's actually even on the emotional side stuff. And so we have a lot of concern, and we are actually start talking to a lot of different financial institutions and trying to understand how well they understand quantitatively the effectiveness of their voice biometric system that they, basically get from their vendor solution.
Right.
Nobody knows.
Yeah.
Right. So what we have done is we utilize Confluent technology alongside with integration with some of the leading call center solutions like Genesis. And then what we do is we combined with integration with some of the streaming LLM alongside with a sample voice biometric detection. Then what we do is we put together a good sample of voice actors, and then we will actually clone the voice. They will actually call into the system. And on the streaming basis, the conversation engine will automatically converse with the incoming caller, which is the voice actor. And what we would do is we will collect all the information, send it into the underlying voice biometric system that we're actually testing against the benchmark that we have. And then we will automatically generate a full matrix to be able to present to the customers on the financial institution side to allow them to understand either the voice biometric system that they're using in production, or they're trying to evaluate to see which system that they would like to prefer to pick in terms of the strength and weaknesses. And once they pick out the corresponding system, that they can actually look into deeply what the weaknesses are. And we can actually submerge ourselves to actually help them to strengthen with additional AI models on the weak area. So that's the system that we have developed. And lucky enough, we just signed our first client on that, a Fortune 500 financial institutions. They love the approach that we're taking. And right now we are working very, very heavily with Confluent because obviously we love the technology that they provide to enable the streaming AI perspective. But at the same time, the partnership program is just amazing. Our partner manager handling the relationship between us and Confluent basically got together with us, understand the target area, working closely with the account executives on financial institutions to kind of like, do co-marketing activities and penetrate into a different target market that we know the persona of the decision maker on the financial institution side that is actually best fit for us for talk to. So yeah, we're very excited about the technology, and then continue to feel important in that area that we're actually part of what they call the fraud fighting capability.
Yeah, right.
Work closely with the financial institutions to protect the customers from falling victim of it.
Well, and I have to think that going forward, we're going to need approaches that bring in multiple bits of information. So that's why you have two-factor authentication everywhere these days, right? And like my wife keeps getting these text messages on her phone, your code is such and such. I'm like, you weren't just on a website. That's someone trying to hack into you, and they're sending the code over to this person. They're trying to do this all the time. And that these bad guys, they're just everywhere these days. And to your point, if you can mimic someone's voice, if you can mimic that level and that important a conduit of information to align with a particular person, that's very, very dangerous.
Oh, absolutely.
That's
Yeah.
very, and people don't, from the consumer side, they don't want to go through all this two-factor authentication. I don't want to do it myself. It's annoying.
Yep.
But the point is, the bad guys are getting so good at copying you visually, at copying how you act. I feel like the answer is going to involve what you're doing at Good Labs to identify how we can discern between real and fake, but also in these other factors like where you are, how often you've interacted, but you got to get that data to be able to feed into some system. So like when I'm traveling, driving from town to town, if there is some data from the mobile phone company or from people I call or something that can be accessed, then it can be like, okay, yes, we know he is in Phoenix right now, but like it's hard to build those models, right? It's hard to get all that data, but if there's one company that can deliver it, I'll bet it's Confluent with streaming data, right?
Absolutely. And on top of it, voice detection, particularly on the clone voice, is a very, very complex topic. You probably know already that when we grow older and older, our voice actually change. And on top of it, there's always seasonality, when it's getting into the winter time, most of the people get sick.
Right.
And last thing you want is in the fighting area, the worst thing that you want is actually creating negative customer experience. Whenever you actually imply more customer friction, you start losing the customers. And how many times that when the credit card got rejected because the fraud got triggered, and then the customer get really, really irate, you lose the customer. But on the other hand, the AI cloning technology on the voice cloning, it's just getting so sophisticated. We recently did a quick
scary.
sample, and scary to the point that after the cloning, and you can type in whatever you want to speak it back, imitating the real person.
That's crazy.
But that voice even have a very, very subtle breathing noise when you talk. And the sound of the smacking lips is very subtle.
Wow.
When I hear it, I couldn't actually tell whether it was fake or not. So there's a lot of area that whether you are trying to detect almost like a video game, it becomes too realistic. So you kind of like trying to spot that or, watermark it, whatever it is. But it's a continuous challenge. And to your point, not only the fact that you definitely need the streaming type of data to enable the detection, number one. Second thing is you need this type of mechanism to be continuously evolving the model. Otherwise, and we are talking about every individual customer need their own voice pre-training. And one of the things that we found also very, very important, AI model actually just advancing so fast. And one of the biggest challenge with any type of organization when they are actually deploying, particularly on the streaming AI model, is they definitely need to create a proper pipeline such that we are talking about AI model advancement every 2 weeks right now. That's how fast we are talking about. And the progression, the resulting of the performance of the AI is drastic. So what they need to do is a proper pipeline such that they can continuously monitoring the performance of the model. And then particularly in the fraud fighting area, when there's actually suspicious activity involved, it will actually flow through to a human investigator to confirm if it's truly a fraudulent activity or not. And once they validate as a human perspective of it, those would be considered as gold standard data flowing back into training. Now you get a proper reinforcement learning with human feedback.
Interesting.
And then you can have like A/B model running, compare, and if you have a latest model, you can actually swap it in. But it's very quantitatively determined whether the B model is actually better than the A model. And once you feel comfortable, you can swap it. So yeah, it's important to have like platform like Confluent to be able to enable not only the streaming data, but the entire AI pipeline.
Well, and we only got a couple minutes left here, but I actually just mentioned this to Jay Krebs today and to, I think, Sean Klaus as well, that I view Confluent as having a great solution for publishing topics on threat actors, where as banks, as financial institutions, as anyone, you could subscribe to these topics and you get a constant feed. Because I see it in my own limited way when certain emails start coming in, it looks like a Verizon bill or it looks like a purchase order, something like that. Like, there are these patterns of how the threat actors behave. And so to have a topic of all the latest, like whose voices are being mimicked now, where are these threat actors coming from, what are the IP addresses, things of this nature, that is very useful. And then we can all collaborate. As the old saying goes, many hands make light the work, many eyes make few the errors. I think that's where we need to go. And I'm sure there's something like that. But what do you think about that thought of having topics of bad actors that you can subscribe to and bake into your model so you know what's happening right now? 1 minute.
Yeah, we are working very, very heavily with different stakeholders on that concept. Obviously, from Confluent's perspective, it's definitely an infrastructure enabler for stream sharing, what we call.
Yeah, right.
And at the same time, we work very, very closely with some of the FSI. Obviously, we have to go through some of the hurdle on the privacy
right,
information, which is very, very top concern from financial institutions' perspective. But having said that, that's one area that we are actually working very, very heavily with all the stakeholders to make it happen. It's important. And one of our advisor, Matt O'Neill, former U.S. Secret Service deputy in charge of cybercrime, it's a very, very active advocate on that. So yeah, it's an area that we are actually very, very focused on. So
that's a big deal. So Thomas Lowe, look this gentleman up online, Thomas Lowe, LO, Good Labs Studio out of Toronto, Canada. Thanks for all your hard work and thanks for working with Confluent to fight these bad actors, man. They're everywhere and no one wants to lose their money,
Absolutely. Yeah.
I once bought apparently 2 tickets to Africa. I was like, honey, did you buy 2 tickets to Africa? I'm like, no, I didn't think so. Like, that's anyway, folks, we'll be right back. You're listening to Inside Analysis.
Thank you.
All right, folks, back here on Inside Analysis at the current 24 Confluent Conference in Austin, Texas, talking all about streaming data and persisting data. And these are two worlds. The old world, you persisted data and then you use data. In the streaming world, you use that data right away and then maybe you'll persist it, maybe you won't. These are very interesting architectural questions to come up with. And I'm here with Lars Herrmann from MongoDB, one of the longest standing open source databases. I use MongoDB for one of the applications that we built called Media Lens. So I know MongoDB, it's robust, it's solid. And tell us how you work with Confluent. So what's the partnership look like and why does it make sense for MongoDB to be such a good partner with Confluent?
So first of all, thank you for having me.
Yeah.
Very excited to being here. My name is Lars Herrmann. I'm Vice President Partner Ecosystem at MongoDB. So I'm responsible for the partnership with Confluent and many, many other partners that MongoDB has. Our mission at MongoDB is to basically make it easier for developers to build modern applications with a high degree of flexibility, security, and scale for pretty much any use case. And so in many ways, Confluent and MongoDB have a very natural partnership because many customers end up looking at our technologies in a very complementary view.
Sure.
Where the MongoDB Atlas offering, which is our cloud database offering, available in all 3 clouds, is designed to integrate a lot of core data components that the developer would need to write an application and store all the operational data, store and access. With the general philosophy of the data is stored where it is accessed, so it performs very well, it scales very well, and of course now with the cloud service, we have additional capabilities around auto scaling, securing that data, and making it available close to the user through a distributed architecture that can span all 3 clouds and lots of regions in these clouds, but also on premise. So now with Confluent, in delivering that data streaming platform vision is a very natural integration where an application typically consists of many different microservices taking care of different aspects of the business. the backend storage of many of these microservices is MongoDB in a modern architecture,
Right.
because it does provide that flexibility for the developer to not be locked into a hard-coded data model the way it used to be with relational databases.
Interesting.
So you have that document model that allows you to evolve your application as you see fit without having to go through costly and complex schema changes in that, and then having to worry about these changes being accessed in the right way.
That's
so you have
very
all that
important.
flexibility at the individual microservice level. And then, of course, many customers do use Kafka in various forms that Confluent offers it to connect these microservices, or also connect applications that need to have access or need to store related data.
Mm-hmm.
That, of course, now becomes even more important when we look at the way how in a Gen AI architecture, what we heard in the keynote this morning, the age of AI requires, or let's say the best way to take advantage of Gen AI is an application that is, as I would call it, more than just a chatbot. Jay this morning talked about actions. Gen AI can now not just converse with a human and answer questions, but actually take action in certain scenarios. And of course, a significantly larger scale than humans could do it. But there's always the constraints as to when are they available and how many hours in the day do they have to act on something. So in that scenario, you need real-time data being available in a retrieval augmented generation architecture to your large language model. So where does that data live in the first place? The data is operational data from your applications. That could be your banking system, that could be your supply chain management, that could be your web front end, your retail store. I think there was an example showed this morning in the keynote. Basically a retail store with people who abandoned their carts. So, and there was a goal to act on this within an hour. So that is a very close to real-time case. Or typically, let's say that application is built with MongoDB, and you can use Confluent streaming capability to basically drive that data into a processing chain to make it ready for the large language model. Then you create embeddings. MongoDB is one of the vector databases that Confluent can interact with.
Interesting.
So we can actually store these embeddings that then the large language model accesses in the same system, in the same platform that stores the operational data, which makes it a lot easier, less components to worry about, security built in, everything integrated out of the box. So that's just one example, and there are many of these.
Yeah, no, that's actually really made a couple of really good points here. One is, as you suggest, you want the data to be close to where it's going to be needed. It's all about performance, and part of the performance storyline is that things don't break. And when you have brittle architectures that have to reach across vast expanses of space and time, you get timeout errors, you get all kinds of things that just don't work right. And so you want it to be as lean as possible, and you want it to be as close as possible to the data that you need to perform these transactions. The other thing you said that's very interesting is future-proofing the application. Because in the old model, you had your data model, and then the application has to fit with that model. If you change that schematic, then you're going to have to look downstream into the app, figure out, oh no, wait, where does this connect and how is this going to be disrupted in the future? And that's very painful. And so what happens? Change just doesn't happen, right? Or you wait until it's too late and then things break, then you have to rebuild it. And so the continuity afforded by this solution is really important. And I think it bears repeating that if you have this proper architecture, you are future-proofing your application, at least to an extent, right?
Yeah, I mean, this is actually one of the, I want to say, most impactful deficiencies of the traditional relational database model.
Interesting.
Which at the time it was created in the, I think it was the 70s.
Yeah, sure.
A very long time ago. It had everything to do with optimizing storage on disk, which is not really a concern anymore, right? So we're basically, the relational databases execute in a world that optimizes fundamentally for the wrong problem.
Right.
But it then does come with this, we're taking an object that in the real world likely evolves over time, how an application thinks about an object, like a customer record or a transaction or a visit on a website or whatever, right? You have different fields, you need to change things. You might run out of space, you might have performance considerations, right? All these things are hard-coded in a relational model in a way that you have to sort of anticipate what changes you might make in the future. which is next to impossible in
Right.
the dynamic business environment
Right.
you're living in now.
Interesting.
So what MongoDB and the document model enables is the ability to basically have a lot more flexible description of your object in JSON, right? JavaScript object notation, simple key values arranged into a structured schema in which you can actually add fields, change fields. You can have nested collections in there. So the developer is free to make changes to that model when they are needed without breaking existing access to that, which is incredibly difficult to do with this relational database.
Right.
So that was the original attraction, I should say, for MongoDB
Interesting.
when it showed up on the scene. And to this day, it is one of the reasons why developers love MongoDB, because it makes it incredibly easy to manage data in your application and also evolve that over time.
Well, and so the evolving over time, bringing in streaming data, bringing in algorithms, being able to do new things with your customers, with your partners, whatever the use case might be, by having that flexibility baked into the foundation, which is MongoDB, the database. I mean, you can really think of databases as the foundation of the information economy, right? That's where you persist the data, but then you also have data flying around up here in the streaming world, and you want some meaningful way to be able to fuse these two things, or to leverage the streaming data within your traditional database founded environment. And that's what we're talking about with this road to AI, right? Is if you have a flexible enough foundation, you can build more on top of it. If you have a brittle foundation, you can only build so far, and then you have to tear it down, like they're going to do with this convention center, apparently, because they didn't design it very well, right? But this is very important stuff, and you'll keep the developers happy too. You know, for me, morale is the most important component of any organization, because when morale is high, good things happen. When it's low, bad things happen. So you're keeping the morale high by enabling the developers to do different things, right?
Yeah, and on that point, so we talked about the next generation use cases, where clearly Gen AI is the thing that everybody tries to make real.
Right.
And of course, we're still in the early days of adoption.
Right.
Clearly, I mean, the rate of innovation is incredible.
Right.
What happens within 1 year? Just read an article that was describing we're hitting an order of magnitude of an advancement in 1 year.
Yeah.
Which is
Crazy.
Spectacular, right?
Yeah.
Crazy, very difficult to keep up with. And actually, many organizations they haven't even been able to figure out, like, what business problem am I trying to solve?
Right.
What application am I trying to build?
Yeah.
And what experience am I trying to offer? Right? Because that is not necessarily obvious. And the enterprises these days, the developers, they don't have these skills yet, right? They're learning and trying to catch up. So MongoDB has actually launched a program we announced it in May and we launched it in July, called the MongoDB AI Applications Program, which brings together best of breed partners of MongoDB to help customers build actual AI applications and put them in production. So we have the 3 cloud service providers in that: AWS, Azure, Google, with their respective offerings. So customers can access any of these AI services, components, models, everything they offer. Best of breed model providers like Anthropic and Cohere, best of breed platforms where this can run, like Fireworks AI, and frameworks for AI like LangChain. And then we also offer that with our service partners who have the expertise and the manpower to help the customer with the project. So we just launched that program.
And what's it called again?
July, MongoDB AI Applications Program, or short MAP.
Ah.
AAP is the acronym. We love acronyms in the city.
Yes, we do.
So MAP really aims at accelerating the customer's journey and giving them a wealth of resources with their opinionated reference architecture, how these components of the stack can get together, combined with the expertise of these different vendors and the service companies to really fast track the customer's innovation. And that is an area that we are looking to expand. It's also something we're talking to Confluent about, of course, because we have very, very similar approaches. But I wanted to come back to another important point you made earlier, which is developers and their morale is driven by, can they actually do their job?
Yeah, right.
And the reality today is, while everybody's eyes are on building the next gen apps, kind of greenfield, the majority of apps are not in that category. They're kind of legacy apps that were built some time ago, maybe a long time ago.
Yeah.
And they all have data in them, because that's what applications do, right? They manage and process data. So how do you now get the data in these applications
Yeah.
into your AI application?
Right.
Or how do you modernize these applications so that they can actually deliver AI experiences and they're not stuck in the technology area in which they were built? That used to be a pretty much cost prohibitive problem to solve for the industry, where customers spend millions and millions of dollars trying to modernize applications. In the end, a lot of them were lifted and shifted into a cloud
Right.
environment, but
That's right.
not actually modernized in
Right.
the process. So now with AI, that's another initiative we have at MongoDB. With AI, we can actually use the capabilities of these AI tools to dramatically lower the effort and cost of every step in this modernization journey, from analyzing the legacy application.
Sure.
Where often the people who wrote it are no longer around.
Right.
You cannot ask them questions anymore.
Right.
To then basically generating a bunch of code, helping with the data migration. We have one product called Relational Migrator, which helps customers to basically transform from the existing relational database scheme that the original application was built on in a traditional database, like maybe Oracle or DB2 or something like that, to a MongoDB document model schema.
Interesting.
Of automation. And then, of course, we can also use AI to generate test environments, generate tests to make sure that the modernized application actually delivers all the functionalities. And we can do this at basically an order of magnitude better.
Wow.
Than you could do it without AI.
Right.
That's super, super disruptive. Now, in that scenario, is another Confluent MongoDB use case hiding, where basically we have built a reference architecture. I think it was about a year ago, where if a customer uses Relational Migrator to get the data from the legacy SQL schema into the MongoDB document model, Relational Migrator can then help move the data from A to B, but not in an ongoing basis. That's not what our
I see.
does.
I get it. Sure.
And of course, now you see the dots connect, right?
Set up a topic.
Streaming. There
Right.
you go. You do ongoing real-time streaming of whatever happens in the old app, whatever happens in the new app. And so this allows you to have a more gradual migration, especially with lots of very large applications, that you can actually use that approach to sort of decompose
Yes.
into more, again, a more modern distributed architecture. So that's another fascinating use case that we see a lot of opportunity with. I actually believe modernizing existing apps has always been incredibly difficult.
Yes.
And now with AI, it's a new world, it's a new day, and we're still early in that journey. I think there's going to be a lot of innovation we're going to see around that.
I think that is very, very encouraging, and it's a great way to end the segment, because you're right, there are so many nuggets of value in those old applications, the data, the functionality, how it worked, what it did, what it's doing for your business today, the fact that you can't just shut it off. And so this concept of a more managed slow motion migration makes a ton of sense, because in the past, what you'd have to do is you set up dual tracks where the enterprise system is still working, but you're trying to set up the new system. And then when you flip the switch, like, oh, you cross your fingers and hope that it goes properly. That's the old way, but you don't have to do it that way now. You can just slowly migrate one bit at a time to get to the future. But we got to close that up. We'll be right back, folks. You're listening to Inside Analysis. All right, folks, back here on Inside Analysis at Current 24, the Confluent Conference in Austin, Texas. I'm with Lars Herrmann from MongoDB, and we were just talking about migrating to new architectures and to new systems, which has always been brutal. I'll give you one of my fun quotes I heard from a gentleman years and years ago. One of the funniest things I ever heard. He said, it's a gentleman who worked for Pervasive for a while. And he said, so elephants go to a special place to die, but there is no software graveyard. It all just goes to the cloud. Right? And I thought that was so funny. But to your point earlier, a lot of times it's this lift and shift into the cloud, which is dreadfully inefficient. It's just not the way you're supposed to do things, because the cloud architectures are different. You mentioned earlier how a lot of the older applications are based on the relational model, which was designed for optimizing accessing data on disk. Well, we don't have to do that much anymore. Another great quote before I hand it back to you, Dr. Michael Stonebreaker, of course, father of the Postgres database, godfather of the database in many ways, Vertica, MapR, lots of different companies. I had him on my show several times. And one of the things he said years ago was, 80% of the code that has been written should just be thrown away. And his point was that old architectures had different constraints. And so you had to work around where the hurdles were and where the bottlenecks were. Well, all that has changed now. And in this new world of cloud-centric, AI-fueled application design, you want to let a lot of that stuff go, but how do you do that? How can you use AI to ascertain what the flow should look like, optimize your new architecture, and hit the cloud running? What do you think about all that, Lars?
I mean, it totally resonates with me because, again, applications are created for a purpose,
Right.
typically to solve a business problem
Yep.
and or deliver a customer or user experience. And naturally, applications represent a snapshot in time
Right.
of these requirements.
Right.
And almost no application in the traditional methodology and technology stack that was built like more than 10 years ago can keep up with these requirements.
Right.
So pretty much everything was destined to become that legacy and maybe ready for the graveyard.
Right.
Love that. Love that. What we're seeing now really is the developers have the toolbox to build modern applications that are not locking them into this static world. Or decisions they make today will be regretted sometime in the future and will be different to unwind. They have the infrastructure services in the cloud, including these platform services like a database as a service or a streaming platform, which can auto scale with their needs, which has built-in security, which can be managed with very, very little effort, so that developers can actually focus on what they're paid to do, which is deliver business value and not build infrastructure. That's not productive for a business, right? That's not productive work. And we have seen that share of time spent on that activity continually going down with cloud adoption. No, you're absolutely right. Lift and shift migration helps a little bit, but it doesn't actually fundamentally alter the dynamics about how can you make this application more useful, more compelling, more differentiated, because that goes back to what it is built in. What we can now do with AI is actually fascinating. We can use AI to modernize and build better apps. Right. So we can actually expedite many of these processes. Things that took months in an attempt to modernize an application can now be done in hours. Wow. Like we have worked with customers. We made an announcement with Bendigo Bank. And so it literally took hours to run an assessment of the application or to migrate thousands of stored procedures into basically code that lives in the application. Again, lots of different examples from various customers, and it's eye-opening what becomes possible. That is just in using AI to build better apps faster. And MongoDB Atlas, our data platform, is designed for that. It's kind of optimized for that. It is about unstructured data that you can access and describe in a very flexible model, the document model. It brings together all different data types, be that traditional, more structured data, like transactional records, but also completely unstructured data, like video or audio or images or anything like that. We had an amazing AI project with Renault that we featured at our .local event in May, where basically they used GenAI to listen to the sounds of engines, and then the AI would make a recommendation to the technician in the field as to what might be wrong with that engine. Just think about that use case. Right? We're analyzing the sound of a running engine to find some irregularities, and we basically let AI do that and help the technician on the front to basically have that answer instead of him going through a long checklist. This is so exciting. New opportunities open, but it does have to be delivered as an application. And the application needs to have that robust data store. It needs to have the ability to grow with your requirements. It needs to have the ability to scale. And it needs to be able to integrate with everything else that you are using in your infrastructure, in your environment, in order to meet compliance requirements, security requirements, performance, whatever auditing needs you might have if you're in a regulated industry. You started the other segment with, do we still need to persist data? The answer is hell yes. Yes, for lots and lots of reasons. A lot of data needs to be persisted. And sometimes it is about performance for the application. So you can write and read incredibly fast without having to go out to networks and multiple hubs. In other cases, it's about you want to have the data on disk so other systems can access it whenever they need to. Right? You have these direct real-time connections, but then also you have the go back to yesterday, a year ago, 2 years ago, give me a more holistic view. And these things become incredibly important with GenAI. Or with today, with large language models, the machines speak English. And you can pick a model that does it in a way that we want more. My favorite would be one with a German accent, of course, but I haven't seen that yet. But now, how does the large language model know about your business and about what interaction your user is trying to have. The example this morning in the keynote, I think, was a banking use case of what were the transactions. So how does that get to the model? That's a real-time data retrieval augmented generation, where we actually can make that incredibly easy to make that data available through a streaming approach, one great option, and then have that embedding going back into the MongoDB Atlas platform, which we seamlessly integrated in there, so that then the large language model can pick it up in the prompt. And now with proven components like MongoDB Atlas, Confluent streaming platform, let's say Anthropic or OpenAI as the large language model, and there's your application. There are the core foundational components of your application. Now you just build an experience around it.
Right. And I have to say, we got just about 3 minutes left in this segment, but when I think about the transformation happening now, think about how big a transformation Docker and Kubernetes created with containerization, right? It wasn't exactly like service-oriented architecture, but it is similar in terms of its objective, in terms of breaking functionality down into bite-sized pieces that can be brought together. That is a huge transformation. I remember hearing in a briefing that MapR was going to re-architect their whole data platform to run on Kubernetes. I was like, all right, this is real. If a data platform company is going to re-architect their entire platform to run on Kubernetes, this is the future. It's a transformation. You have to refactor. And I think every software company, or almost every software company, is going to have to figure out where they're going to fit in this RAG world, because a lot of the stuff that we did other ways, we're now going to do in near real time as requests are made, quality checks are applied, governance. Yeah, you want it upstream. That's true. You want to go all the way left, but you're also going to want little check marks on the far right-hand side as things are happening. Real quick, 2 minutes left. You obviously see this, and I presume you're going to agree that companies have to figure out, where are you going to live in this new world? Because it is a new world, and the old ways are going to slowly fade. What do you think?
I mean, first of all, I appreciate the Kubernetes reference. I was at Red Hat for these years when Kubernetes happened, and we ended up creating OpenShift, which became the market-leading platform for all that. I had my hand in that in various ways. But to your question, I think every technology vendor has to, of course, figure out like what is their role and value add in this Gen AI architecture.
Right.
Generally, what we have seen that with Kubernetes and Docker, is that there's a tendency that certain aspects of the stack, from the infrastructure up to the application experience, over time get absorbed and abstracted.
Right.
And developers just move up one level.
Yes.
And execute and operate at a next level. Right. So that's generally been the trend in the tech industry. Gen AI now is likely going to take it a leap further than just that. It's not going to just be, we're going to abstract a layer and we're going to do it better as a result, because Gen AI now can actually do things that developers used to do, as my modernization example played. So now that creates not just a challenge for vendors to having to figure out how do they position themselves and add value, but also for customers, where do they focus their efforts? Which is precisely why we at MongoDB, we believe we're incredibly well positioned, because we are one of these centers of gravity around operational data in the enterprise, in these applications that can be relatively easily enriched with Gen AI, and at the same time can then be brought to other Gen AI use cases. Again, probably through Confluent streaming. The second thing that I believe is critically important is to keep the options open. In every of these technology revolutions, we've seen the danger of locking yourselves in. And we're still there with OpenAI. So an open architecture is an imperative.
Well, this is fantastic stuff, folks. Look this gentleman up online, Lars Herrmann, Herrmann. Don't miss a letter. You're listening to Inside Analysis.